Hey, what's going on, everyone? It's Sunrise Sports and MMA here. Today, I'd like to take a walk down memory lane. I want to go ahead and talk about the various UFC deals over the years related to their TV, streaming, and exclusive rights. I want to go back to 2005, which is where this all began. And here we are on the cusp of what would be year 21 going into the Paramount deal. You could say the UFC's coming of age, right? Finally sit down and have a drink, turning 21 years old, right? At least when it comes to deals and execution. Let's look back where this all started, right? Spike TV. Based off of what I could find, the deal was about 100 million as of the final years of that deal, which was 2007 through 2011. But the deal began and ran from 2005 through 2011. During this period, we know that saviors of MMA, as we know it today, was heavily thanks to the Ultimate Fighter and, of course, the finale itself, right? Where we saw Forrest Griffin and Stephen Bonner put on an absolute banger, right? So, I mean, you could say that the modern era of the UFC owes these two, and RIP Stephen Bonner, uh, a lot of gratitude for bringing this mainstream at the moment, but starting to create the foundation for what would end up being massive. Right? So during the like TV era, we can contribute the rise of a lot of fighters during that time. A lot of the greats came up, a lot of great fights. We're talking Anderson Silva versus Dan Henderson. We're talking George St. Pierre, Matt Serra too, when GSP got his lick back, right? Talking Forrest Griffin versus Quentin Rampage, talking Brock Lesnar versus Randy Couture, and so on and so forth. Of course, who could forget BJ Penn, right? And George St. Pierre, what was arguably one of the first super fights in the UFC. So tremendous era. And then that takes us into what would be the Fox era, right? 2011 through 2018. The deal, what's interesting is that based off of what I can find, we're talking it was also 100 million per year. So the question is, did Tough and the fighters that I mentioned during the Spike TV era, again, not that they didn't transition to the Fox deal or the Fox era, but they elevated the brand more to be a mainstay brand, in my opinion, right? But it didn't elevate the value to say we're going to pay you 1.1 billion. And again, we're talking about an UFC that at the time was predominant meatheads. I'm sure we all remember those days. You know, Tough guys. It was not mainstream. Your girlfriend more than likely didn't watch it. Your sister didn't watch it. Your mom would ask you to turn the TV off. Things of that nature, right? So it was building, right? It was building an audience. It was gaining fans. It was gaining popularity. But again, they took their ball, went over to Fox. You could say a little bit more mainstream, right? Because now you were on some of the Fox, channels, especially the main broadcast channel. And during this time, I like to call this the legitimized era, right? For UFC and MMA as a whole. I mean, we're talking the rise of John Jones. I think his defense came on the heels of the Fox deal. You're talking about the rise of Conor McGregor and Ronda Rousey being staples in terms of most popular polarized athletes then and even now, at least for Conor, right? Mean, you're talking about DC versus John Jones. I think 1 and 2. Yeah, 1 and 2. And you're talking about that second fight. That is the best fight trailer I've ever. I mean, DC versus John Jones 2. I mean, that was cinematic, superiority. I mean, what do you want me to say here? Right. And that deal again was 2011 through 2018. And I can't forget Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz, right? Throughout the 2016s. I mean, guys, it was like the Renaissance era, right? It was just amazing fights, amazing product. And here we are now moving into the ESPN deal, right? The era that most of us know. We're talking, it was a 5 year, $1.5 billion deal over 5 years. Excuse me for my redundancy just there. Again, average of 30 fights, 12 pay-per-views. And that's kind of where we're at now, right? That's what we're averaging. We're averaging 42 to 43 weeks of UFC MMA content every year, which is amazing, right? Especially for us fans. During that time frame, one of the significant uh, fights that might have elevated that 100 million to 300 million a year, right? Almost a 200% increase from the Fox deal has to be Khabib versus McGregor. I mean, it was the bridge between the two deals. I mean, this was a McGregor who was on fire coming into that new deal with ESPN. And we know everything that happened with McGregor thereafter, and we're not going to go into that part. Everyone knows that. But then you had some bangers, right? You had Poirier versus McGregor, 2 and 3. You had McGregor versus Cerrone. As you can see, McGregor is the underlying, one of the most underlying factors here. You're talking about Usman versus Masvidal, Fight Island during COVID. We all know Burns originally should have been his opponent, but I mean that propelled Masvidal into star in himself, even though we know he never got to actually win the title, right? And then during 2018, you're talking about, 2018 to 2025, you're talking about so many fights. The rise, we all know the rise of Pereira. We know the fights between Izzy and himself. We know about the Moreno and Figgy. Was it 4 fights? I think they all took place during that 7 year span or 5 year span. You're talking about an amazing amounts of, how about Poirier versus Dan Hooker? I mean, Dustin Poirier versus Dan Hooker. I mean, you guys remember that? Do you remember hearing those blows in the apex? Because it was so quiet because we didn't even have fans. I mean, memorable moments. The fact that Dana White and the UFC pushed try to be the first sports organization or sports events, period, to be broadcasted during that 2020 year is was fascinating. And I think that a combination of all of this propelled them to what was the $1.1 billion a year average rights deal that they have in place now. And let's go to Paramount Plus real quick. We're talking 1.1 billion. Let's put this in perspective. Guys, between 2005 and 2025, inflation went from 2.43% annually. Okay. So we are talking about 50.47% inflation from 2005 to 2025. That important? Well, consider the Spike TV deal, right? And the Fox deal with which on average was 100 million per year during those, the majority of those years. So we're talking 2005 all the way up to 2018, which, not a significant needle mover. But what happens from the Fox deal to ESPN? We're talking 200% increase right there. And then what happens from the ESPN deal, Paramount deal? You're talking what, 800% increase? So overall, 2005 until now, the new TV rights deal. We're talking just on that, the UFC is at a percent increase. So screw your inflation. We don't care about that. Hope you were invested in the UFC early on if it was public. I can't remember if it was, but that's insane. Right? That's an insane amount of return. Right? You're talking $1,000 for every dollar that you would have invested. Again, I'm not saying that that translates into the actual dollar amount of the organization, right? Valuation, but damn, it has to be very influential. Not, guru or anything about the other sort. So, guys, I'm gonna stop there. It was great recapping this. Please like, subscribe, share. Appreciate you. Till next time. Sunrise Sports MMA. Out.